Welcome, everyone, to the 100 Monkeys of Hope podcast that Krishna and I are putting together as a little way of reflecting on our Designing for Hope book, which is 10 years old this year. We're providing the book free online for download. So go to the website in the show notes and download the book. Connect with us on podcasts and listen to us reflecting on the journey of writing that book. Welcome to episode 5, where we're talking about the things that we can learn from nature, how we can use nature as a model and a mentor, and how we can work with techniques such as biomimicry, such as building challenge, living machines, and the whole thinking of circularity and how ecosystems and metabolisms work. So also at that model level. So strap yourself in. This is going to be a great little pod. Hey, Krista, here we are again.
Good morning, Dominic. Or good evening for you.
Yes, it's getting dark very early these days. So, as it is our custom here in Australia, I'll start with a very brief acknowledgement, and particularly as we're talking about country and nature and what we're learning and how to walk together with nature. That sense of honouring the wisdom in the land and the wisdom in the relationship with the people, First Peoples, with the land is really important. And so I pay respects to elders past and present, and particularly those present who are carrying that wisdom and who are starting to trust us and share with us that wisdom of relating to country. So with that, today we're talking about the other aspects of working with nature. Last episode, we talked about biophilia and that innate need to be connected to nature that we have. We're healthier mentally and physically when we're connected to nature. But now we're moving to, okay, yes, it's good to be connected to nature, but nature's been around for almost 4 billion years, nature. How do we better enable our learning and our walking together with nature? The aspects that we explored in the book was biomimicry, living machines, permaculture, and John Tillman Lyles, creating regenerative landscapes. Of those, we might put permaculture in its own episode because there's a bunch of stuff to reflect on in there, and just talk about biomimicry, living machines, and creating regenerative landscapes here. But we'll see how we go. As usual, we'll probably just go off in tangents. So starting with biomimicry, what's your take on biomimicry?
Well, I think for me, this whole thing goes about how do we nourish a co-creative partnership with nature. And biomimicry gives us some of the guidelines of how we do something like that. If you think about Janine Benyus talks about biomimicry as our way of using nature as a mentor to learn from, because it has this 3.6 billion years of experimentation that we can learn from. She talks about learning from nature, using nature as a model to show us how to do things. And nature is a measure to tell us how to recognize when we are reaching tipping points, when we are going off the rails, when what we are doing is not really helping and damaging. And I think biomimicry to date is very much fixated on the physical aspects of that. How do we look at nature and how nature does solve particular design problems. The very famous one is the Shinkansen trains and the beak of a kingfisher, or the whole Velcro thing of having this little how those little thistles and
Birds.
things
Yeah.
have and birds stick to fabric and making something of you. So those are the very well-known examples of biomimicry. But people forget about the part of biomimicry is that it also creates things in life supporting conditions. So if you're doing something and it uses high pressure and high temperatures and very poisonous chemicals to mimic how nature does a particular thing, is that really biomimicry?
Mm.
Or is it just stealing? It's sort of like the natural version of cultural appropriation. To just take that on. And I think it's important to step back and to think about what are those key aspects of biomimicry and of how nature does things, working with sunlight, not messing up where you live. Everything is a resource for something else, making use of resources efficiently. understanding that it's not, nothing works separately, everything works together.
Mm.
And that we are structured in systems, and each of these systems, every organism or every part of that system has a very important role to play. It's not something that you can take out of the system, because then the system starts collapsing. So I think there's a lot of those kind of things that we need to keep in mind when we start talking about applying biomimicry, and then also how we structure the ways that we work with nature.
No,
And I think
I
that's,
really like. Yeah,
yeah.
go on.
No, I think that's where things like the living machines that John Todd and the New Alchemy Institute brought together, is that they really looked at how these systems work in order to
Yeah.
solve a particular problem.
Yeah, so yeah, the particular example that I love really illustrates that is that particular project in Japan, the Baima Canal Restorer in Fuzhou, I think is how you pronounce it, Fuzhou. Sorry, all you Chinese listeners are out there for my pronunciation. I like the whole story of that, and then there is a little bit of out there in the world that it also didn't work for a little bit, and now it seems to be working again. But what they managed to do there is they had a very polluted canal, and they had a very expensive technological way of fixing canal and bringing the water back. And then John Todd came with colleagues and created one that I think the figures say cost 90 to 95% less money. So it only cost 5 to 10% of the money that I had earmarked for the mechanical solution. And in doing that, he created a walkway for children to get safely to school. He created all of these plants that were both cleaning the water but also creating beautiful flowers and a great environment to walk through. And part of his methodology is to really observe the place and observe how nature is doing what they're looking to do, and then find those creatures and support those creatures to thrive. I really loved that it was a simple, nature-based, lower cost, and continually adapting process. So I did read one article where there had been a drought, and so canal didn't have as much water in it, and so because they're living systems, they didn't thrive in that drought. But all the recent papers seem to say that it's still working well. I haven't been to the site, so I'm not sure how anyone out there let us know. But what I like about that is that it reinforces the need for that relationship to continue. So it's not something like a machine that you create and you walk away from. It is actually a living system, a system that you've designed, and so you have relationship with that system. And so
Mm.
that needs to stay. And I agree with what you were saying around biomimicry often being taken as a set of rules that you can then apply to just create your product, yet its potential is so much greater. Uh, I think our whole book, the ecological worldview, the thinking about how do we function more and learn more from the wisdom of nature, and how to be relational, how to be humble, how to be connected, how to be integrated, interrelated, that all comes from connecting our uniqueness to the models that we can find in nature, walking together. Now,
What
that's
I
what I
like
like about
about the, yeah, what I liked about the living machine stuff is that they use it to take places that we've seen as wastelands and as nobody wants to go there. I'm thinking of the Burlington sewage treatments, the Omega Center sewage treatment, the Emmen Zoo where they treated the waste effluent from the hippo enclosures, and how those have been turned in from places that nobody really would like to go because it was smelly and messy, and it separates us from one part of the cycle into places where people would go and do yoga classes or have parties or picnics in the case of Burlington, or visitors coming in and be educated about how this process works and how you can work with nature to solve what we now see as problems, but it's actually not a problem. It's just the way that we've structured things that have created the problem. And reconnecting us to ourselves and to our own connection to these natural cycles in a very visible and way.
Yes, and it's in the breaking of those cycles and trying to solve for individual elements of it that we're creating the problems that we're trying to fix. And so by reconnecting it as a system, to think about it as a system, is part of that, modeling it on how nature does things. It doesn't
Yeah.
do things individually. Things are done relationally as a system, connected to each other. One is
Yeah.
the waste and to the resource of the other. But yes, the Amiga Centre is one of my favourite projects. It's an educational centre, and that was designed, it was the first Living Building Challenge project. BNIM were part of that project, and Bob Berkebile and the team. And not only was it the first building that demonstrated that Living Building Challenge was possible, but they ended up creating this water treatment plant that is so beautiful that it's booked out for yoga, and it's hard to get in and actually look at the system, and it actually treats the water, so that the water that comes out of the site is better than it would have been, without the that intervention. So they're actually contributing positively to the flows within that region. And so I think that's such a beautiful story. You know, we can not just solve a problem, we can create an opportunity to heal so much more.
But I think what is really grown in the past 10 years since we've written the book is this whole notion of the circular economy. I mean, we had it with
Mm.
industrial ecology and Gunther Pauli's Zero Institute and everything like that. But it's now really become a mainstream thing where people are starting to understand that we can get much more value if we start linking all these various streams into an economic model where the waste of one becomes a feedstock for something else. And that way we keep a lot of waste out of the system, but we also continue with this path of evolution in how we do things and in our industries.
Yes, in fact, I was just writing a speech today where I'm connecting regenerative development and circular economy, and how do those two fit together. And I was thinking around circular economy, and this in the book we talk about John Tillman Lyle's work, which was very much landscape based, but he was one of the first people that connected the word regeneration and the potential of that to that idea of thinking not in a linear way, but more in a circular way, at least from my reading at the time. And so I was thinking, okay, what is that potential of regeneration with circular economy? It's not just to become circular, but it is actually to create an industrial ecosystem or metabolism or industrial ecology. It's actually looking at everything that you're producing within a site and trying to connect those things so that the waste of one becomes the input for another. It doesn't stop there, because once you start talking to your neighbors and your other
Yeah.
people around you, then you start understanding them, and you create relationship and resilience, because suddenly you know who does what and how you can rely. Because somebody might have a mechanic and your mechanic's sick, so you know that you can rely on them. And so it just becomes not just a physical movement of flows, it actually
Mm.
becomes a human movement of connection and so forth. So
So
I really agree that this whole section goes into that idea of circularity.
and the one thing I'm playing with at the moment, and I've got a bunch of students helping me with it, is to look at if we take this further and we say we need a new industrial revolution, not just this 4IR, 5IR that goes all the way into AI and technology and basically makes humans obsolete and totally ignores nature. That we need an industrial revolution that works with nature, that is based on these principles. And in our sort of scoping studies to find out how much is happening already in terms of new materials being developed, new processes being developed, and through all of that, entire new communities of scholarship, communities of industry, but also then communities realizing themselves that we have potential and we have possibilities and we have resources available that we did not know that we have because of these new things that people are starting to, or new ways. It's not even new things, it's new ways of thinking about what is a waste product and how can we do this and make use of this in ways that creates these kind of ecosystems that makes up different, made up of different guilds and niches, as we will get to when we get to permaculture. And I really think this is this we're standing at a point, and the history of the world, where we really are going to choose whether we go into that darkness and everything that goes with it and the control that goes with it, or whether we're going into the path of life. And that it's there. The potential for both of these paths are there. And it's now, how do we move into the path towards life and not the path towards the death of our humanity and the death of our very ways of
Potential.
being on the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's how disappointed nature would be if that's where we end up. I've
And
put
then
all this
nature will
effort
get
in
rid of us.
creating you. Why are you over there?
Yeah.
Why aren't
No,
you
no,
in the light
nature will just say,
in the love?
okay, we'll try again, because that is also the essence of nature. It's constantly experimenting, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly trying. And if you read the books that John Todd and Nancy Todd wrote about their processes around the living machines, how many failures they've had in these processes, and how they've had to fine tune, and now you have to understand each and every place is different. Each and the climate is different. The feedstocks that you get in from this place's waste stream is very different than you would get from another place's waste stream. And how do you then structure and design your ecosystems to help you treat these wastes and remove the waste from the water? So I think nature is very forgiving about failure. We might just not like being one of those failures.
Yes, yes, yes. It's up to us to choose. Such, you know. Um, do we want to walk to life and to be part of the future narrative, or do we want to continue ignoring all the feedback loops that we're getting and don't and choose not to because
But
it seems too hard?
if we can circle back a little bit about to biomimicry as well, as I think us coming, or well, me coming definitely from the built environment, is always about how do you apply this. So it's part of it is applying it in the landscapes and in our infrastructure, but it's also the buildings. And we're thinking of people like Mick Pierce, who was a real pioneer in this with this Eastgate Center in Harare, mimicking how termite nests work and realizing it's not just about the airflow, it's also about the surface areas and about how you manipulate that, and how that kind of thinking has evolved until now I read it, or I saw a video, I haven't read about it. I saw a video by Doris Sung who talks about buildings that breathe, where she uses metals that are that's memory metals. So when it heats up, it folds open and it allows for airflow, and then when it cools down, the little petal goes back again. Thinking about that same processes of how a plant breathes and how and how transpiration happens in plants, and other aspects that has come in is we're dealing with such a lot of waste, and not just hard waste or construction waste and material waste, but also food waste and agricultural waste, and the potential that sits in those streams for us to generate new things. And there's a product that I also picked up that I think it won a John Dyson Award. It's called Aureus Systems Technology, or that's the company that is now pushing it. Also, a young student coming up with this idea of taking food waste and in some way turning it into UV solar panels that can work like windows and make these beautiful windows. So it's really starting to push the possibilities of what we can do if we start thinking in this way of how do we work with nature and collaborate with nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much potential in innovation, not just in looking at your particular process, but if you're in an industrial park, looking at your neighbours and in the conversations, there is also lots of opportunity of innovation. And the number of conversations that I've had while I was working on our National Circular Economy Committee, where by enabling people producing things next to each other just to start trusting and building conversations together around what have you got? What problems do you have? These are the problems we have. And just sharing that information just created so much more opportunities for those organizations and for those industrial parks. it's very exciting if we just choose to go, as you said, in that direction. We closed off that chapter with what are the strategies that we learned from those as they apply to the whole regenerative mindset and thinking. And these were, and we've kind of mentioned them all. First, nature's strategy is to use resources efficiently, right?
Mm.
Don't be wasteful. Waste is just waste. It's resources that you've paid for that you throw away. Why would you do that? The second strategy was to integrate different systems and elements so that they can share effective resources, as we've talked about, industrial metabolism, talking to your neighbours, building that relational opportunity, both human and physical.
Mhm.
And that then enables cooperation and co-evolution.
Uh,
And this all start to sound very familiar to everybody online. And then the
I
fourth
think the
strategy
one
was, yep, go on.
that's the one that we didn't talk about is the need
Yep,
for options,
yep,
of making sure that we have diversity and redundancy in the system so that if one part
number
fails,
four.
something else can take over and permanently or temporarily just fill that niche until there's water in the canal again or the oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was the first, the fourth strategy. Yep. And then the last one is learn from nature. Look at how nature does it. Yeah.
oh.
So those were the five strategies that we got from this section. Our next episode will be looking at permaculture and the growth of regenerative agriculture and all of the things around that, and we'll reflect on some wonderful projects that we've visited in Africa and in Australia. So lovely to spend some time with you, Krishna, and see you next time.
See you next time.